allow him to share it and introduce yourself now. Continue your presentation, Matt.
Well, thank you, Judy, for introducing me. Yeah, my name is Mateusz. I'm from Upper Silesia in Poland, which is kind of unusual place or environment. You could expect natural history passionate to originate from. I come from a very industrialized and very, let's say, unnatural place in the world. I come from a mining region of Upper Silesia in southern Poland in Europe. But yeah, as Judith said, my passion since I was 9 years old have been the Tepuis of the Guyana Highlands. And I have had multiple occasions to visit your beautiful country, Guyana. I have had multiple occasions to visit Venezuela, to visit Colombia. So many countries, all of the countries that are sharing the remarkable geographical region of the Guyana Shield. And I would like to share a part of this love for the Tepuis and for the Guyana Shield with you today and tell you a little bit about this extraordinary environment that you have in your country. So let me just see if I can share this presentation that I prepared. Just give me a second. Can everybody hear me loud and clear?
Yes, sir.
Good. So, okay. So, can you see the first slide that I'm just showing on my presentation?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, to start with, I got a question for you. What do you think is in the picture right here?
Mount Roraima. Mount Roraima.
And that's not Mount Roraima. This is actually pretty funny because the last time I was in Guyana and I landed at the Cherijagan airport, there is a big picture, a big painting where you have the luggage area. You have a big painting of this mountain, which is of course a Tepui. Those big tabletop islands in the sky that you might know from multiple stories. Of course, you know Mount Roraima, but actually this mountain is not Mount Roraima. This is Mount Kukunan or Kukunan Tepui, which is in Venezuela. It's right next to Mount Roraima. It's more characteristic. It's more photogenic, I would say, than Mount Roraima, but it's not Mount Roraima. So just to start with, here you can see a picture from a recent expedition that I did. It was actually in Venezuela. What you see on the left is one Tepui, is Kukunan Tepui, which you just saw on the previous picture. But Mount Roraima is is not as picturesque. It's not as beautiful as Kukunan when seen from this perspective. But Mount Roraima is actually more to the east from Kukunan, and it stretches all the way to Brazil and Guyana. Obviously, is the highest point, highest territory in your country. Just to start with this presentation, please remember that Mount Roraima is something different than Kukunan. It looks different, and it's right next to Kukunan Tepui, but it's here in this picture you can see it more to the right. But of course, there are both Roraima and Kukunan are Tepuis. So those magnificent giant islands in the sky. But what's interesting is that there are two ways to get to the Tepuis, especially when I'm talking about the eastern wall of the Tepuis, the Tepuis that mark the border between Venezuela and Guyana. From Venezuela, as you might know, Mount Roraima is a pretty popular tourist destination. You can get there pretty easily. Just take a jeep, you drive to a small indigenous village called Tepui, and then it just takes you 3 days of hiking in the savannah to get to the top of Mount Roraima. From Guyana, from your country, it's more complicated. It's a much more difficult project because Guyana is situated a little lower than Venezuela, and it's in the Venezuela is in a rain shade, so most of the rain, most of the humid air that travels from the Atlantic Ocean and travels all across Guyana above this lush rainforest that most of your country is covered in. This rain falls on the foothills and on the tops of those tepuis, including Mount Roraima. So when this rain falls, it forms this beautiful, pristine rainforest that stretches all across Guyana. But in Venezuela, it's you have something that's called La Gran Sabana, which is a great savanna. So as it's in the rain shade, it's not receiving as much rain. It's the elevation is a bit higher than in Guyana, so you have vast grasslands. So it's much easier to approach Roraima from the Venezuelan side, but it's also possible from the Guyanese side. And here you can see how Mount Roraima looks like when approached from the north, from Guyana. But it takes a long way. You have to get to the region of Cuyuni Mazaruni, then start either from the indigenous village of Kako or Philippi, where the group of you have to get some guides, some assistance from the indigenous community of the Akawaya tribe. And if you're lucky and you're prepared, obviously you can also reach Roraima. But first, a little bit about the history of exploration of Roraima. You might know Roraima as the Lost World, and where does this name come from? Does anybody know what's the origin of the name the Lost World for Roraima? Hello?
Yes,
So
we are.
the Lost World was written by Arthur Doyle.
Oh, I'm having some trouble hearing you. Okay, is anybody familiar with the name Sherlock Holmes?
They are writing in the chat.
Oh, let me see it. Sorry. Where can I see the chat? Here it is. Okay. Yeah, Arthur Conan Doyle, the author of the legendary series of books about the legendary detective Sherlock Holmes. Actually, he was frequenting the meetings at the Royal Geographical Society in London in the late 19th century. And in the late 19th century, there was a group of British explorers who were pretty preoccupied. They were obsessed with the vision of exploring Mount Roraima, which was they when the first explorers they approached Roraima, they thought that it was impossible to reach it because you have those sheer vertical walls that are covered with rainforest, and without the balloon, but people didn't have airplanes or helicopters back then, so it was it was extremely hard for them to even imagine a way to get to the top of the Tepuis, and that's how the fantasy started that Mount Roraima is like this island in the sky, isolated for millions of years. So people were speculating that maybe there is even a way that dinosaurs have survived on the summit of Mount Roraima and the other tepuis. And listening to those stories, Arthur Conan Doyle wrote his science fiction masterpiece he called The Lost World. And that's how the tepuis, since that time, they have been known as the Lost Worlds for basically for the whole world. But in 1884, there was an expedition led by a British surveyor. He was actually a researcher in Georgetown back in the time when Guyana was still a British colony, and he was appointed with a task to try and explore Mount Roraima. This guy was Everard M. Torn, and in 1884, working in collaboration with the indigenous people of the Pemon Arecuna tribe, he ventured into what's today Venezuela, and they saw this portion of the wall of Roraima right here. That's today it's called La Rampa, which is the approach way to. It's an approach route to get to the top of Roraima without any problems. They needed to clear some forest. They needed to cut the trail, and that's how they managed to get to the top. When Everard in turn reached the top of Roraima in 1884, he left a note in his diary calling it the summit. He called the summit of Roraima some strange country of nightmares. And that's probably because of how unearthly this landscape is. When you get to the top of Roraima, you pass by those sheer vertical walls that are like 500 meters high, and you're basically walking in a forgotten realm of it's like you're in the sky on an island. You're surrounded by the sea, but the sea is not made of water. The sea is made of clouds, and it's to the point of this presentation, as you might expect, when you're on an island, a place that's been isolated for millions of years from the surrounding environment, it's a great environment for endemics in the world. And some of those species, they originate from organisms that still remember the times when South America and Africa were one continent called Gondwana. Uh, the tepuis are basically so old that evolution, I wouldn't want to use the term stopped, but it moved in a totally different direction. This environment is so unique, so isolated, that the organisms, the plants and animals had to adapt to this very, very particular environment. And even though most of Mount Roraima, a large part of Mount Roraima summit is mostly barren, comprised of sandstone, but you have a lot of places where you can see the full beauty of the Mount Roraima and the Tepui wetlands. And those wetlands are usually they are usually present in the what's called the Pantepui zone, which is the area that starts from 1,500 meters above sea level up to almost 3,000 meters above sea level. You might know that the highest tepui is actually situated in Brazil. Mount Roraima is one of the highest tepuis, but the highest tepui is Mount Neblina, and it's on the border between Brazil and Venezuela in the deep Amazon. So you have those magnificent, curious places where you can find those wetlands, and that's where the biodiversity of the tepuis is the highest. But here you have the comparison. When you are on the top of Mount Roraima, which is above 2,700 meters above sea level, you can see all of those rocky formations, like sculptures, some weird rocky shapes. And among those rocks, you have patches of those wetlands that are isolated, are scattered across the summit of Mount Rema. But this happens only on the highest tepuis. But in Guyana, of course, you have in your country there is a part of Mount Roraima that is very high. You have Mount Ayangana, which is also very high. But most of the tepuis that are situated within the territory of Guyana, of your country, is more like on the verge of the Pantepui zone. It's more like 1,500 meters, 1,600 meters, sometimes lower. So your tepuis are like on the border of the Pantepui zone and the lower Tepui zone. And here you can see the comparison of how you explore those places. Here you see Mount Roraima, which is very high. You're on 2,700 meters above sea level. And here is a Tepui in Guyana, which is called Wakayan Tipu. It's near it's close to the indigenous community of Porima in Cuyuni Mazaruni. And you can see how the exploration of such summit looks like. It's basically a forested plateau that's filled with water, filled with mudland. So penetrating it is extremely, extremely hard and extremely dangerous sometimes, and extremely hard to. This environment is very hard to be in because moving around isn't as easy as on the high tepuis. But those tepui wetlands that I wanted to talk a little bit more about is something that I'm personally very interested in. And you can see on some of the photos how this environment looks like. It's very foggy, even though there is not much soil that the plants can attach to. It's very wet, but there is not much peat, not much soil that they can develop their roots in. So it's basically this rocky environment, but it's very, very humid. You have those clouds rolling over the mountains, so it's very misty, very hazy most of the time. Here you can see some of the characteristic species on the Tepui. This tree in the middle, it's more a shrub. It's called Bonitia roramiae. There's also this plant that you might see on most of those photos. Here is a Tepui wetland on Mount Roraima in the rain. There are two species that are very abundant on all of the Tepuis. It's Stigolepis and Oryctante. Some of those plants are also present on the lowlands, even in the savannas in Cuyuni Mazaruni or in southern Guyana or southeast Venezuela. So here you can see how a typical Tepui wetland looks like. You have specimens of Bonitia ramiae. It's this orange-red shrub that's growing all around the place. It's very, very abundant around the Tepui summits, and those saber-like green leaves is called Stigolepis guyanensis. It's one of the species that Stigolepis guyanensis is present on Mount Roraima mostly, but you have other species of Stigolepis growing also in the lowlands in Guyana, around the villages of Kako, around the village of Philippi, of Purima, Waramadang. So it's a pretty abundant plant around the Guyana highlands. And of course, you might also know that the Tepuis to have those magnificent Coca-Cola colored water that's also flowing down from the walls, forming some of the highest waterfalls in the world, and flowing down and forming those Coca-Cola colored rivers, both in Venezuela and Guyana. But of course, you also have some other formations. What you can see here is Lago Gladys or Lake Gladys. Actually, it's a lake named after a character from Conan Doyle's novel The Lost World. There was Lady Gladys, that was a love interest of the main character of the story. So that's what they named the lake after. It's a lake on the summit of Mount Rema, and that's these are the areas that where you can find most of the wetland species that are typical to the Tepuis. Here you can see actually what lower elevation Tepui wetland looks like. It's on the summit of Huacaintipu in Guyana. It's close to the border with Venezuela, and those saber-like leaves you have all around the place is Stigolepis ptaritepuiensis. It's actually named after a mountain in Venezuela, Ptaritepui, but it's very, very abundant in highland areas that stretch all the way to Guyana. So you have a lot of it in Guyana as well. And this is a better view over the Stigolepis plant. And I have a question for you. Has anybody heard about the significance of this plant for the indigenous community?
Sir, can you repeat the name of the plant?
Among the Pacaraima Mountains in the highlands and in the mountains. And if any of you travels to visit the Akawayo people or the Pemon indigenous people, you might encounter people collecting those plants because they produce some form of a strange mucilage. It's like a transparent gel, and the indigenous people actually use it as a shampoo to wash their hair. So it's a really interesting plant. It hasn't been studied thoroughly, but it has a very interesting application among the indigenous people. So if you ever have a chance to visit the Cuyuni Mazaruni region, you might see them, and you might see what the local people are using it for. May I continue?
Yes,
Yes,
please.
sir.
Okay, so another kind of plants, and the kind of plants that I'm mostly familiar with, is something that you see on they are very abundant on the summits of the Tepuis, because the Tepuis are very, very challenging environment, and there is not much soil, and even if you have the soil, it's very poor in nutrients. So this way, the plants needed to adapt to this very, very hard environment. So they adapted in a way that they evolved to actually be able to get the nutrients from the surroundings. And that's why you have so many carnivorous plants on the summits of the Tepuis. Probably the most popular carnivorous plant is Drosera. Here you see one of the species of the Droseras that is growing on the Tepuis. It's Drosera hirticalix. You also have it in the lowlands in Guyana. It's mostly abundant around the savanna areas and around the banks of the rivers, where you can where they have access to very, very moist soil. As you can see, they produce this sticky mucilage on their leaves, and that's how they trap their prey, and that's how they get their nutrients. Here is a picture of another species of Drosera, of the sundew. It's called Drosera roremii. It's very, very abundant on the top of Mount Roraima, but you can also see it all around the Gran Sabana in Venezuela, but also in some higher areas in Guyana, like Mount Ayangana or Huacaintipu. And this one, I would like to say a few words more about it. This one is Drosera solaris. This Drosera was discovered on one of the tepuis that's called Mount Meringma, and it's actually only in Guyana. Mount Meringma is one of the smaller tepuis that's right next to Mount Roraima. You have a few smaller tepuis that are situated east of Mount Roraima, and one of them that's close to the village of Philippi, which is an Akawayo indigenous village in southwestern Guyana, is called Meringma. And this particular plant is known only from this one single mountain. So this is a very unique plant that grows only in your country. And of course, you have some other types of wetlands. Here you can see a picture from the village of Kako, which is next to it's very close to the Mazaruni River by a river called Kako. Actually, Kako means jasper in the local indigenous language, the Akawayo and the Pemon language. In this picture, you can see another carnivorous plant that's typical to the Tepui and the highland Guyana Shield wetlands. It's called the Brucinia. It's a bromeliad. You can see it here in the bottom of the picture. It looks like this, and it uses UV reflective covering on its leaves to attract insects like cockroaches. Here we can see a picture of a cockroach that's been trapped in a Brucinia plant in Guyana. One more interesting thing about Brucinias is that some species of Brucinias are carnivorous themselves, but the others are in a symbiotic relation with with other carnivorous plants. This Brucinia that you see here, that you also is known from Guyana, is Brucinia tatii, and it's not carnivorous by itself, but it's in a symbiotic relation with another carnivorous plant that's called Utricularia, or a bladderwort. It's a very tiny carnivorous plant that's more accustomed to aquatic environments. And in some of those plants, the bromeliads, they collect water, specifically rainwater, in the middle of in the middle portion of the plant, where the Utricularia, the carnivorous plant, hatches and develops. So even though Brucinia tatii is not carnivorous by itself, it uses the help from its symbiotic friend, Utricularia humboldtii, in this case, to trap the prey for it, and it gets the benefit of collecting the nutrients that's extracted from the prey collected by another carnivorous plant. Here you can see Brucinia tatii in the rainforest, and here how it grows on the summit of Mount Roraima, where it's more arid, a more challenging environment. The plants are more stout, they are more compact, and they are growing in those tiny rock crevices where they can attach to some portions of the soil that are available on the summit of Mount Roraima. And I just mentioned this carnivorous plant that is symbiotic with Brucinia utricularia. It's a genus of plants that's mostly known to be aquatic, but they also grow in many different kinds of environments. There are also terrestrial species. This one you see here, this tiny yellow flower, a very inconspicuous plant, but it's also a very sophisticated carnivorous plant. This is probably Utricularia hispida, and it's a photo that was taken next to the village of Kako in Guyana. But they also grow bigger. They also have some species that are more picturesque, more spectacular. The one that you see here is a pot. These are cultivated plants. Those spiky plants in the middle are Ainsua waipanensis, which is a Venezuelan endemic. But next to it, those oval leaves is an epiphytic species of Utricularia called Utricularia quelchii. So we can definitely see that they come in many shapes and forms. And here is another Guyanese plant. It's Utricularia alpina, which was photographed in Cuyuni-Mazaruni region, close to the border with Venezuela. So you can see what the difference is. You can sometimes see them in those tiny, tiny, almost microscopic forms that are very inconspicuous, but sometimes they are very, very large and very showy. So they're a very sought after item in the American and European collectors market because people grow them as ornamental plants very often. So here is a picture of Utricularia quelchii on Mount Roraima, those red flowers. And this little yellow one is another species, Utricularia subulata, which is very, very abundant on the Grand Sabana, but also in Guyana. This one was found next to the village of Purima in Cuyuni-Mazaruni. Another plant that is very, very popular in the Guyana Shield and especially Tepui wetlands is Oryctanthus septrum, which is, it looks like a bromeliad, but it's also actually more related to grasses and sedges. It's a member of the Ceridaceae family. You can see it here growing on in a high Tepui zone. Basically, when you go to any highland wetland, especially in Gran Sabana, it's quite rare in Guyana, but if you get to Venezuela and you go to the Gran Sabana, you can find this one very, very often. Another one are the ferns, very, very interesting and unique ferns called Pterozonium. You can see that they are growing among clumps of Drosera, the carnivorous plant I mentioned earlier. And of course, the most showy of them all, the most I don't know how to call the most unique carnivorous plant of the high Tepui zone is Helianthera. Here you can see Helianthera glabra, a species that is known from Venezuela, Guyana, and part of Brazil. It grows like the most interesting habitats that it grows in are actually located on the summit of Mount Roraima, but only in the Guyanese sector. So you have other species in the Venezuelan sector. You have hybrids. You have other species in the Brazilian sector, and this one grows in the largest quantities within the Guyanese sector in the north. Another Helianthera that's native to Guyana, Helianthera heterodoxa. Here's a picture of my friend Calio from the village of Porima, the Pemon Aracuna village in Cuyuni-Mazaruni. We were lucky to find just one clump of this plant. It's quite abundant in this Gran Sabana in Venezuela, but it's very, very rare in Guyana. And there are only a few places in Guyana where you can find them, and they are very, very hard to find. Another one is Helianthera elongata. This one has not yet been confirmed to occur in Guyana, but it's possible that it's there. It's just the slopes of the Tepuis that they are known from have been studied from the Venezuelan side, but nobody studied the slopes on the Guyanese side. So even though it's not known from Guyana, there is a chance that it might grow there. And one more that is native mostly to Venezuela, but might also be native to Guyana. Time will tell whether it's true. It's the most popular Helianthera. It's Helianthera nutans, a smaller species that's mostly known from the southern and southwestern parts of Mount Roraima. One more interesting plant I wanted to tell you about. This is Meguiartamnus speciosus. it's a very interesting plant. It grows only on very, very high Tepui summits above 2,000 meters above sea level. And it's the recent studies have shown that in the leaves it has some mycorrhizal symbiotic relation with the fungus that's called taxol, and it's a compound that's used for the production of cancer treatments. So who knows? Maybe this plant will have some applications for medical for the medical industry, or help cure some diseases in the future if it's studied more thoroughly. And the last part of my presentation is how can we save the Tepui wetlands? Of course, you know that we have climate change right now. The environment is getting more arid, more dry, especially in places so isolated like the summits of the Tepuis, like Mount Roraima. This environment is in very, very fragile balance right now, and it's the plants rely on humidity, but this humidity is mostly coming from the air. It's not like it's constant rainfall. Many of the species are dependent on mist, on the haze. So when you have climatic disruption of a global scale, of course, places like the summits of the Tepuis are getting very, very much affected by it. So we have to think about the ways of how to preserve those plants. And even though we are not able to preserve and save the climate as it is, in many cases, we have to accept the fact that many of those species will go extinct in the coming years. But fortunately, we live in the 21st century, so we have all the technology at our disposal. So one of the means of conservation of those plants is actually providing them a place to survive. Even if they go extinct in their natural habitat, we have ways to provide them a place to thrive, because we can collect, of course, legally and sustainably. We can collect some seed material, and we can recreate the conditions that are on the tepuis and try to grow those plants in artificial conditions. Here we have an outline of a project that I have prepared. It's it's an idea of a system that, on one hand, you have a measuring equipment that measures the climate on top of the tepui, and you have an environmental chamber that recreates those conditions that are present on the tepuis, and you can actually grow and propagate those plants. And even if they go extinct in some time, they will still thrive in botanical gardens. They will still thrive in collections. So even though we can't save them all, we can at least try to save a part of them in artificial conditions, and save them for future generations. The problem with Helianthera, here we have actually, it was my first Helianthera that I got at in a garden center here in Poland. But the problem with with Heliantheras and other wetland plants from Tepuis is that they are accustomed to such unique, such extreme environments. So even though they have been introduced, many of them have been introduced as ornamental plants or collector plants, it's not just enough to plant them in a pot, put them in the soil, and expect them to thrive. This is a picture from, it's almost 20 years old. It was one of my first experiments to grow tepui plants in my at home. But it's not enough for Helianthera or other tepui plants to thrive. Actually, you have to provide them very specific conditions. You have to provide them enough light, because the light is very strong on the top of the tepuis. So you need to use the most reasonable way right now to grow tepui plants is to provide them LED lights. You can adjust the spectrum to simulate what they are getting on top of the tepuis. Of course, you need some climatic systems. You need to have a simulation of rainfall, of the clouds rolling over the Tepui summit. So you can see a conservatory I built here in Poland. You can see it's a quite sophisticated machinery, because it's not just a glass box that you put your plants in and they just grow. These plants are so unique, and they're accustomed to so unique environments that they need to have the conditions simulated in the most proper and most uh, direct way that's possible. You need to provide them humidifiers. You can see those tiny blue tanks here that provide humidifying. You need some way to provide them air conditioning, because of course, on the top of the mountains, if you are up on the top of Mount Arema, you're 2,700 meters above sea level. So even though during the day you're getting scorched by the sun and it's almost like desert environment, at night the temperature drops to down to like 8 or 10 degrees centigrade. So you need to simulate those conditions and those growth chambers. So you need automatic air conditioning to provide those nightly temperature drops, and of course you need to simulate the very strong sunlight that those plants are getting on the summits. So you need very sophisticated lighting systems to let them survive. But what you get in return is something that is uh, best of both worlds. You have something that's fun, because you get the satisfaction of growing something that's so unique and so relic. It's dating back millions of years of evolution, and you are helping the conservation. So if you have a source of a legal and sustainable source of those endangered plants, and you encourage more people, you encourage scientists, you encourage collectors, you encourage botanical gardens to develop those systems, you have a way. It's like an arc of life. You can collect those plants in a sustainable way and let people enjoy them, let the indigenous people enjoy them, to try to grow them, treat them as ornamental plants. But that's how you help conservation, because even if a day comes when those plants cannot survive on the summits of the Tepuis because of the climate change, because of the droughts, because of other problems, there will still be some part of them that will survive in captivity. So maybe there are times where if we manage to save the climate, if we manage to keep the climate at an acceptable level, uh, we have a safety backup of those plants that will be possible to replant them in their natural habitats and save those environments. So I see it as a way of conservation for the fit for the 21st century, because we can use technology not only to satisfy people, but to help us conserve and preserve and save some parts of the nature that will most likely be damaged or even destroyed in the coming years. So I see it as a very exciting and very interesting and very important opportunity for us to research and to use for the preservation of something that is totally unique and very important for us to study and to take care of. So basically, that is everything that I wanted to tell you. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'm really thankful to Judith for providing me with this opportunity. I hope you don't find this boring or I didn't bore you during this presentation. I hope you found it interesting, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Matt. Well, I imagine the students um, have an important opportunity to understand these wetland environments. So if you have any question for Matt, they are going to do
I have a
a
question.
synthesis. So,
I I was listening to the types of carnivorous plants that he would have mentioned within the wetlands. However, I wasn't able to get a direct count of how many are there, because there's some like there are very few carnivorous plants within our wetlands in the interior. So I would like to know what's the count, the amount he would have discussed with us.
Oh, you're asking me about the number
And
of
if it
plants?
is possible, yeah, the carnivorous plants that you would have mentioned, and if it's possible, if you can maybe relate to our lecture the names and the pictures of these plants, because the names of, as you were calling them, it was very hard to pronounce and to keep track of. But if it is that we could get a list of the names of those plants that you were discussing with us earlier and a picture to go with it, so we could know what is we are looking at when we actually encounter them in whatever wetlands we might go to.
I think an easier way to do it would be to send you like sort of an album with photographs and just write those down, because when I'm talking about them, they're all Latin names, so I believe it's hard to remember them. But I have many pictures of them, and I know the names, so I could prepare you like an album, like a digital file where you can see examples of those plants with their names in Latin and maybe in English as well, so that you can whenever you go into the interior, you have some better idea of what you're looking at.
Yes, that would be nice. Thank you.
Or if any of you has, maybe let's do it that way. I will write you my direct email, and if any of you has any questions, you can just directly send them to me. And if I have any, when I have any materials or some albums or some photos that you would be interested in, you can just ask me directly, and I will be happy to help you. I've just sent you my, like when you look at the chat, I have just sent you my email address. So if you can write it down and save it, I'm open to any questions, and I'll be happy to assist you.
thank you, Matt. I think that will be a good idea. So, can we see your face?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's well, I did the presentation of what you are
I
going to explore it is, so that they can, if they can see you sometime, then they have an idea of who you are. Thank you very much.
thank
Okay,
you.
Matt. And well, I think we can just close the recording, and this presentation will be in my YouTube channel, so I will send you that to you as well, Matt.
Okay,
This is
thank
for
you.
them to have it. And
Thank
then,
you. And I'm hoping I'll get the chance to visit Guyana very soon. So whenever any of you would like a chat by a coffee table, I will be happy to do so whenever I have another opportunity to visit your beautiful country.
As Matt, Ariel is asking you, at what rate is biodiversity being lost on these mountains due to climate change?
It's very hard for me to give you like a specific number, but I've seen myself the results of the climate change happening. Actually, there is I will send you a link. It's actually a fresh thing. We have seen something that's probably the first ever case of a wildfire on the summit of Mount Roraima this May, and it's just been published. So let me just see if I can find the link. So the changes are visible. I wouldn't want to provide any specific numbers because I don't want to make any mistakes. But there is, if you can just send me an email, I will give you some sources, some books that explains in detail the threats that the Tepuis are facing and the predicted rates of biodiversity loss. So basically, the principle is that the Tepuis, especially the high Tepuis, the species that you have on the summits, they have adapted to live, and this is a very very specific high mountain environment. And when the environment is warming up, usually what happens in the nature when you have a typical mountain environment, the species that are accustomed to the high elevations, they migrate higher and higher. But the tepuis are like islands, so they have nowhere to migrate to. So yeah, when the climate is when the climate change gets beyond the point where the species can adapt to new conditions, there will be a point somewhere where they will just be unable to adapt further or to migrate anywhere. So they will just go extinct. So I don't know about the numbers, but this is what's happening, and this is what will likely happen in the coming decades. That some species that are found only on the highest Tepui summits, they will just disappear. Let me just see the link.
Okay, are you going to write the link for the...
Yes, I'm actually just sending it right now. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, and there is that book from Rule et al. That has
Yes,
most
biodiversity of
fascinating. I
Tepui.
don't know if you have it in so I think it's biodiversity of Pantepui.
Yes, exactly. That's the most comprehensive publication right now about the climate, about the biodiversity
I
of
will
the
include
Tepui.
the Amazon link for that. Well, I think it's okay. So now you have all his email, and then we can close the talk now. Thank you very much for your contribution to our class. And
Very happy to
that
do
is
it.
more
No
than
problem.
that. Yes, and I am very happy that students Guyanese students can see the importance of our Tepui vegetation. Okay, so students, and I will send all your an email a message by Moodle and the link for the YouTube channel where this presentation will be included. Okay? And same for you, Matt.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a good afternoon.
Have a
Bye.
good day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.